So till last day, we were looking at various painting traditions of India, and today we will be seeing a sculptural tradition. So maybe for a few more days we will be looking at the sculpture traditions. So today we will be looking at the terracotta traditions. Actually, there are different regions where we find different terracotta traditions, but we won't be able to go into every details of each of these areas. But we will be having a general outlook of the terracotta traditions of India. And there are many others we may not be looking at, but we will be looking at the most important terracotta traditions. And the most important terracotta traditions in India are found in different places like Mullaila in Rajasthan, then in different parts of Gujarat, then in Tamil Nadu we have terracotta traditions, in Bengal, in many other areas also, but we will be looking specifically at these areas, particularly Mullaila, Gujarat and Tamil Nadu, and maybe we have a glimpse of Bengal also. So that's what we are going to do today. So do you know the meaning of the word terracotta? What is terracotta? What is terracotta? Means many of you are in sculpture, from the department of sculpture. So you will be doing work on terracotta. So Nidhi Bodhana says it is red clay. Means if you know the literal meaning, if you want to understand the etymological meaning of the term terracotta, what is terra? We said terrestrial. Terra is about earth. Terra, territory. So it's about land, it's about earth. And cotta is coming from both these words are coming from Latin. These words are coming from Latin. So in Latin, terra cocta. Terra Cocta. Terra cocta, which means baked earth. Terra is earth. Cocta means baked. So the baked earth. So that's how terracotta literally means baked earth. And terracotta can be simply defined as clay-based earthenware. When we say terracotta objects, it simply means clay-based earthenware. So some objects that is made out of clay after baking clay. And all over the world we see terracotta objects. Maybe in a tea shop, maybe for flower pot, maybe we are using brick. And in our daily life, we see the use of terracotta. And when you look at the practice of using terracotta, it has a long history. In most of the ancient civilizations, we find terracotta objects being used, terracotta vessels, pots and containers. We see it has a very long history of tradition. So it has a very long tradition. In history we see that means in Indus Valley, in different other civilizations we find the use of terracotta wares. And the craft, terracotta craft is more or less the same as its name. It refers to the art of shaping the clay into beautiful designs and then baking them in very high temperature to grant them stiffness and stability. So unless you bake them, it will not be stable. Maybe it looks very hard after getting dried up in the sun, but it may be destroyed very soon if it is not baked. So after you bake it, it gets stiffness and stability. So it is the art of shaping clay into beautiful designs, maybe for the purpose of, maybe for some particular function, or just for some aesthetic purpose, or making some sculptures like votive figures which are used for veneration. So that's what we see in terracotta sculptures. And the history of terracotta tradition is amazingly rich and very varied. If you look at the history of terracotta sculptures or terracotta earthenware, it is very amazingly rich and grand. The history of terracotta dates back to several thousand years, from Indus Valley civilization to Mesopotamia, from Greek civilization to Chinese dynasties. Terracotta has been widely used by people across the globe. So it is not something that is unique to us. It was used across the globe, and it was one of the earliest inventions of human civilization. So it is found across the Indus Valley civilization, Mesopotamian civilization, Chinese civilization, the Greek civilization. So everywhere we find the use of terracotta. Maybe the clay may be different in different areas of the world, but they had this tradition all over the world of baking, of shaping clay and baking it in order to make it stable and stiff. When you try to understand the terracotta as a craft, it could be one of the earliest attempts of man in order to achieve a craftsmanship. So it is something that involved human craftsmanship from an earlier time, from an ancient time. So they were attempting to make out something from clay. So one of the earliest attempts of craftsmanship of men can be found in terracotta objects. An integral part of the terracotta creations is potter's wheel. When you try to understand the method of making terracotta objects, the potter's wheel is an integral part. The potter's wheel is an integral part of terracotta making. In the creation of terracotta, it has a very important role. And it is one of the earliest machines that was invented by man in order to use the power of motion for a productive purpose. So you know how the potter's wheel is working. So there is a motion, it is revolving. So in the power of motion, they are trying to produce something out. They are trying to create something out of it. So it is one of the earliest machines. It is one of the first machines which was invented to use the power of motion for a productive purpose. And coming to India, there are so many areas where we find terracotta traditions. I will share the slide. So you are seeing the names, the areas which we are going to look. So we see very vibrant terracotta tradition in these 4 areas and also in some other areas, but we focus on these specific areas, namely Malayalam, Gujarat, Tamil Nadu and Bengal. And Malayalam is a very nondescript village in Rajsamand district of Rajasthan, situated on the banks of the river Banas. So Malayalam is a very small village which is in the Rajsamand district of Rajasthan. A small village in the Rajsamand district of Rajasthan, situated on the banks of river Banas. And how the terracotta tradition of Malayalam is different from others. The distinction or uniqueness of the terracotta figures of this region is that they make terracotta plaques, and it is made only there. That kind of plaques are made only in Malayalam. That's something that is very much unique to the Malayalam tradition. They make plaques, figures on plaques. If you remember, in the art history department, we have a plaque placed on the corridor in front of Jairam sir's room. Do you remember that? When you come for lectures in seminar hall, in the first floor, on the corridor, on the wall of the corridor, you find a terracotta plaque. Do you remember? Anybody remember that? Have you seen that? So there is a terracotta plaque there. So that kind of terracotta tradition is very much unique to the Malayalam. They make it on a flat surface, unlike usual idols made elsewhere. When we make an idol, usually we make a freestanding sculpture. That's what we see in most other traditions. They stand alone, they stand free. But in Malayalam, what you see is they make it on a flat surface and they fix or they make out figures of gods and goddesses or images from day-to-day life, everything on that. And this craft existed since generations and caters to the tribals who travel from as far as Madhya Pradesh to buy them every year. So they make this, and this is the main consumers of this terracotta product is the tribals from different regions in Rajasthan and Madhya Pradesh. So they travel as far as from Madhya Pradesh in order to buy them every year. So they have some ritual functions and all that we will see. So when you try to understand the stylistic aspects The most important figures are of Devanarayan or Dharmaraja and Nagaraja. Nagaraja is a snake god. So these are the two important figures which appear on the terracotta plaques which is made in Mullaila. And the tribals prefer bright colors to depict each god. So they have importance for color. In order to make a deity, when they make a deity, each deity has its own color. So there are very specific colors. So blue is used for Kaladev and orange is for Gauradev. Orange color is used for Gauradev. Blue for Kaladev and orange for Gauradev. And usually they change the votives every year. Means after a year they will change the votive. So it's a votive offering. Every year they change it. They don't keep it for long. They make it every year and every year they change it. And there are rituals associated with this motif that they are making, and those rituals are believed to be helpful in preventing misfortunes. So it will help them to avoid misfortunes in their life. So that's what they believe. So this is a votive offering made in order to avoid some kind of misfortune that may probably come to their life. So blue color is used for Kaladev and orange is used for Gauradev. Okay. So they have specific colors, very vibrant colors used for different gods. Blue is specifically used for Kaladev and orange is used for Gauradev. And about the mud they are using, the Mullaila clay is very much muddy in color and it is dug from the bank of river Banas, which is 2 kilometers away from Mullaila on Nadwara road. So if somebody is from that particular area, they will be able to identify, they will be able to understand. So the Mullaila clay is dug from the banks of Banas river and which is 2 kilometers away from Mullaila on Nadwara road. And in that region, each potter has his own spot for digging out the clay. So they will not go and dig the clay from anywhere. Each potter has their own specific spot from where they dig out the clay. And that is based on his previous experience. So the clay of a particular spot will be something special to him. So they are very particular about the clay that they use. They don't dig from anywhere. In that particular area from where they get the clay, each potter has his own specific spot from where he dig out the clay. Based on his own, and it is based on his past experience of using the clay. So the quality of the clay which they like will have, means they will be spotted on a specific spot and from there they dig out the clay. And how do they make these colors? They make it colorful, and they make it colorful by using natural stones and mineral colors. So they take out colors from natural stone and mineral colors, and they use a kind of clay slip. So what is a clay slip? The clay slip means, if somebody doesn't know, maybe those who are in sculpture may be very clear when I say clay slip. Clay slip is a liquid mixture of slurry of clay and other materials suspended in water, and it has many functions in the production of pottery. So sometimes it is used as a colorant. So when they mix that clay slip, that clay will get a particular color. Or it is used to fashion the clay in a particular way. So there are different functions for clay slip in the making of pottery or terracotta objects. So Paleva is the clay slip, and they make different colors when it is mixed with different elements. So that is how they make the color. So how do they make the color? So they mix it with different elements in order to get colors. For instance, you find silver is made with Paleva and water. The silver color, the tone of silver is made with Paleva and water. And the reddish color is from Geru, red soil. When red soil is added to the mixture, it becomes reddish in color. And as a binder they use something called Dabri Gund, which is a vegetable gum. So a vegetable gum that is called Dabri Gund, they use as a binder, and they collect it from trees. So from certain trees they collect Dabri Gund, which is a vegetable gum, and it is used as a binder. And in order to get shining, in order to make the pottery shine, they use jala. Locally it is called jala, which is a lacquer coat. They apply lacquer coat, which is locally called jala, in order to make the pottery shine. And they never use varnish, because varnish is not an organic material. Something synthetic is not allowed to be applied on gods, because what they make is votive offering, and it cannot be applied on sacred objects. Something that is synthetic, something that is not natural, cannot be applied on sacred materials. For that reason, they won't apply ordinary varnish. They use this natural material, the lacquer coat, for shine. And in the entire region, only one family make jala. In the Mullaila region, only one family makes this jala. The others will buy it from them and they are using it. So only one particular family makes jala in the whole region of Mullaila. So I will show you some images. So are you able to see the making of Mullaila sculpture, the Mullaila terracotta? So by looking at the image, you may understand how they are making it. So they make the plaque, they make certain small motifs with hand and fix it onto the plaque. It's a votive terracotta of Mullaila, and you know the motif, what it is. Krishna stealing butter. So if you look at the themes, most of the terracotta plaques from Mullaila, they are mainly depicting the deities from Hindu pantheon. So that the main themes of terracotta of Mullaila, they majorly depict deities from Hindu pantheon. And the terracotta idols imbibe the images of gods and goddesses like Ganesha, Chamunda, Kali, Durga, the regional deities and heroes of the folk legends. So it is not only the Hindu deities, the heroes and deities of the local legends also come. So you see Durga, Krishna, Ganesha, everyone is there. And also Nagadeva. So which is according to a folk legend, Nagadeva is very important for them. So they represent Nagadeva and some other deities and heroes of folk legends of Mullaila, of that particular region. And that is about the ritual tradition. But nowadays the talented Mullaila artists use their skills to depict interesting stories through this art form, like scenes from everyday village life, and likewise we see in the work of their hand. So apart from the religious tradition, nowadays you also find a talented Mullaila artist will be trying to narrate stories, interesting stories, or they will be depicting scenes from everyday life. That's something that we see today. And one can easily find art pieces of Mullaila like told vases with coil work, and murals of Srinathji, murals of Radha Krishna, or murals of Gauri Nritya. Gauri Nritya is a religious dance form of southern Mewar. So Gauri Nritya is represented in the Mullaila terracotta, and Ganesha and some other deities. So these are the main things that are depicted in Mullaila art. You see Ganesha here with so many other deities, and making it hollow. That is also something unique. If you look at the robes, you will find hollow spaces underneath the figures. So that is also very much unique when they do this kind of relief kind of murals, relief kind of sculpture. So there is a lot of hollow spaces underneath the figures. See this plaque. See the hollow space given, the hollow relief work. It's a special feature of Mullaila terracotta tradition. Okay, so we are moving to Gujarat. So after Rajasthan, we are trying to look at Gujarat. So one of the most important regions of this terracotta traditions of India is Gujarat. Because in different parts of Gujarat you find terracotta traditions. It's not just one. It is not just one. There are at least 3 different terracotta traditions that you can identify from different parts of Gujarat. And they are known as Gundiali terracotta, Ambaji in the north, and Garasya tribes terracotta. So Gundiali, Ambaji and Garasya. These are the 3 particular terracotta traditions that you find in Gujarat. So Gujarat is very famous for its beautiful hand-painted clay products which are made using the wheel. The most common of these include clay pots which are designed to perfection and decorated with eye-catching geometrical designs and figures like fish and many other beings on the pot. So geometrical figures of fish, birds, plants, floral motifs and animal motifs, etc. So it is found, there are Gundiali terracotta, Ambaji in North Gujarat, Garasya tribes terracotta. So what is Gundiali terracotta? Gundiali is actually a small village in the Mandvi Taluka of Bhuj region of Gujarat. So it is in the Mandvi Taluka of the Bhuj region of Gujarat. There is a small village called as Gundiali. And for generations, craftsmen have been making earthen pots, matka. So for generations they have been making matkas for generations. And the significance of those matkas are, they are made in the same shapes and designs as those seen in the Harappan excavation. You understand? So in the small village of Gundiali, which is in the Mandvi Taluka of Bhuj region of Gujarat in India, for generations craftsmen have been making earthen pots, matka, which we usually call as matka, with the same shapes and designs as those seen in Harappan excavation. I will show you the region, then you will understand. That's interesting. So it actually falls in the Indus Valley region, means you know the Indus Valley civilization. So Gundiali is in the Bhuj region of Gujarat, and you know that map shows you the Indus Valley civilization, the areas covered in Indus Valley civilization, in parts of Pakistan, Rajasthan and Gujarat. You find the Indus Valley civilization. So Gundiali is the white spot given in that Rann of Kutch, close to Rann of Kutch in Bhuj region. So they make matkas which are in the same form and shape of matkas that were excavated from the Indus Valley region. So that is something very special or significant, something very remarkable. So these are the matkas or Gundiali terracotta of Gujarat. So you see pot there, pots in making. So it's a very simple design, an earthen pot of very simple design. But it needs a set of skills and material like any other craft in order to make these pots, though it looks very simple. Like any other craft, it needs a set of skills in order to make it, and also the material necessary for it. In the making of this Gundiali terracotta, the potters are very particular about the raw material. That they get this mud from a specific area of 5 acres, some 45 kilometers away from the village. So they go 45 kilometers from the village in order to collect this particular clay. So they are so specific about the clay they use for making these pots. And they treat the clay very well in order to make it a fine product. So to make the mud finer, they grind it and sieve it. So they grind it, they sieve it, and they put the mud in water for 2-3 days. And it becomes soft enough to be given a desired shape. So they process the clay. After collecting the clay, they grind it, they sieve it, and they put the mud in the water for 2-3 days so as to make it soft. So then they can take it and make it into a desired shape. So it can be converted into any shape they want. And this soft clay is shaped into a pot on a potter's wheel. and left to dry in the shade. So that's how they make it. So using a potter's wheel, they make the shape of the pot and leave it in the shade in order to get dried. And then it is cleaned and put in the sun to dry. Again, it is put in the sun in order to dry. In the image, what you are seeing is it is put in the sun in order to get dried. And once it is dried, they bake it in a furnace. They bake it in a furnace after it is dried in the sunlight. And the furnace is usually powered by locally available fuels like cow dung, dry wood, etc. So that's the process through which they make Bundiali terracotta or these matkas of Bundiali. So they grind the clay and they sieve it afterwards, and they put the clay in water for 2-3 days so that it becomes soft. And once it is soft, they will be able to shape the clay, fashion the clay the way they like. And they put it on a potter's wheel and make the form of the matka. And they dry it in shade. Then they again dry it in sunlight. After that, they keep the pot in furnace in order to make it stable and strong. And they use very locally available fuel like cow dung and firewood. Once it is taken out of furnace, it looks very much like the ancient painted graveware pottery, and the patterns that are painted on them also follow the similar aesthetic language. So we refer to the ancient Indus Valley pottery. So once it is taken out of furnace, it looks very much like the ancient graveware pottery, and they also draw patterns on them that are very much similar to the Indus Valley pottery, or it has a very similar aesthetic language. So the human need for decoration is timeless. Even if it is in an ancient civilization, you find people decorating whatever they make. So it's a aesthetic need of means once we turn human beings, every human being has the need of aesthetics. So the human need for adornment and decoration is timeless. And the pots of Bundiali get their red color from geru, mud, a type of soil, and means they use a type of soil called geru in order to get red color. And black and white dots and stripes are also made with natural material. So they make some kind of stripes and stripes or dots on the pot using some kind of natural material. And the terracotta pots of Bundiali are distinct from the other ones we see in other parts of India because of their smooth finish, which is a result of repeated cleaning at every stage of the process. So when they are making it, at every stage of the process, they clean it. They repeatedly clean it. Because of that reason, the pot of Bundiali, the pots made in Bundiali tradition is very fine and smooth in finish. And they make not only matkas, they make different other things also. If you look at the production of Bundiali terracotta, matka is one of the most important of their productions. And it is not only matkas, they also make diyas, especially during Diwali, earthen lamps, and gulak. Gulak is coin bank, and cups. They make plates and glasses. So these are the different producers from Bundiali terracotta. So mainly they make matka, which they most sell in the summer, and the potters also make diyas during the Diwali, gulak or coin banks. They also make cups, plates, glasses, etc. And it's an income for them. Okay, so that's about Bundiali terracotta. And we see Garassia tribes and also the Ambaji terracotta. So Garassia tribes terracotta, the Garassia people's terracotta. So these are Poshina motifs of Ambaji. Poshina or Ratanpur is a town in Poshina Taluka of Samarkanda district of Gujarat, and it is located in the northernmost side of the Samarkanda district. So Garassia tribes terracotta and Ambaji terracotta. Okay, you see the image. You in the first look itself, you understand the peculiarity or the common feature of this terracotta. And who are the people making this? So it's a potter who is making it. They make the terracotta sculptures using wheel. They shape different organs of horses or any animal they make using wheel. After making different parts of it, they fix it together. And certain parts they mold with their own hand. So who are the people who make these horses? In the northern Gujarat, there are two castes. The people of Variya and Gujar caste of North Gujarat make this pot. Apart from them, the Garasya tribals, the Garasya people also make this pot. So they are the people who make these horses, not pots, horses. So we saw these sculptures now. Who are making this? So the villagers who belong to the Variya caste and Gujar caste of North Gujarat, they make it. The potters who made these horses are the Variya and Gujar caste, and they sell the horses also to other people. Okay, they sell the horses to other people, but their main customers are the tribals, Variya and Gujar. These are the two castes who make the horses with clay, and also some of the tribals make the figures by themselves. Almost the same technique as that of the villagers. The making is not very different. The only difference is that when the villagers make the horse, that will be fired in a kiln, in a furnace. So the villagers fire the horse they make out of clay in a kiln or furnace. The tribals, when they make these forms, they remain unbaked. They don't bake it. In the north of Gujarat, the clay is very excellent for working on the wheels. And when they work on the wheels, they can make it hollow. You can look at the image and understand how they make it hollow. So the clay of North Gujarat, means in North Gujarat you find very excellent clay on which you can work on potter's wheel. So that's the reason why you find these figures in hollow form. So that's a practical reason for that horse being hollow. And why it is made? What is the purpose of making these figures? They make it as an offering. Okay, why do they make these clay horses? They are made for making, they are made for offering it in the temple. Offering to the deity. So the offering can be individual or collective. So offering can be by an individual person, or it can be collectively done by a particular village or a clan or a family. Okay, so it is made for offering. And for small offerings, they put for smaller offerings, they place the horse together with the wish and some other small goods like fruits and certain agricultural produces in the sanctuary. So when they have a small offering, they buy a horse, and along with this horse, they also put some kind of fruits or some other products of their work at the sanctuary. And if it is a bigger wish, normally they don't make it in advance, but afterwards, after making the offering, they wish the same, wish for something. Okay, if it is a very big thing that they want in their life, they make the offering first, and afterwards they make the wish in front of the deity. So that is the purpose of making these horses. It is an offering, maybe individual or collective, and if it is a small offering, they put the offering of horse with the wish and also some other small goods like fruit or something. And if it is a bigger wish, they make the wish normally after the offering is made. How is the offering done? It's a ritualistic process. There is a ritual. So when they make the offering, many people join for the procession. The clay horse, which is made by the potter, is taken from the house of the potter in a procession. They follow a ritual. They follow some strict regulations for the ritual. So they all together go to the potter's house, and in a procession they bring the horse out of the potter's house. From the beginning of the order at the potter's house, they go and order for a horse at the potter's house, and until the offering is made, there are different processes, and during all the process, they follow certain strict rules. So it is governed by strict rules. The entire process of this offering, starting from the commissioning or ordering of the horse from at potter's house, and in the process of taking it in a procession to the sanctuary, and the offering made there, all of them are governed by very strict rules. And the horses are made only for this special purpose. And after once it is offered, they are all destroyed by they are not manually destroyed, they are not actively destroyed, but it is left outdoor in the sun. It is in the wind, in the rain, that get destroyed by itself. So after it is offered, that is abandoned outside, and in sun, rain and wind, that is naturally destroyed. So it is made for a special purpose and it is not used repeatedly. They don't repeatedly use the same votive sculpture again. And Sabaskanda district of the village of Poshina in particular is also known for its votive figures. These figures are integral part of the rituals practiced by tribal communities like the Garisia Adivasis, and the terracotta horse is called Ghoda Dev. So the terracotta horse they call Ghoda Dev. And you must understand the significance of this ritual. The Ghoda Dev has special significance in the rituals and is considered as the messenger of God. The Ghoda Dev is the messenger of God according to their tradition. In many cultures you see that it is not only with terracotta tradition of Gujarat or the Garisia tribe. In many other traditions also, Ghoda remains a messenger. So Ghoda Dev, according to their tradition, is a messenger of God, is a messenger for gods. And the symbolic sacrifice of terracotta horses for fulfillment of wishes is common. And at some sites you can see scores of terracotta horses that have stood here for decades. So when you go to certain sites, in the beginning I showed you some images, you find scores of terracotta horses standing in rows. For decades it has been there, which was offered there long ago, years before, it was offered there. So it's a very significant part of their ritual. And the potters are usually called as kumbhars. And they make the various hollow parts of the terracotta horse on their wheels and then join them together. So they make the different parts of the terracotta horse or any other animal also. In some traditions you find different other animals also. So they make the hollow part of terracotta horse or other animals on wheels, and after that they join them together. And some parts which are not hollow, they are molded by hand and they add it to the grooves. So they put grooves on the terracotta molds which they make, and it is joined together with what is made in the that is made using the potter's wheel. These terracotta horses, elephants and other figures, they also are popular because it can be used to adorn houses or gardens or balconies. Okay, not only for ritual purpose today, they also became very popular also because they can be used for decorating houses or decorating gardens or some popular places. Okay, so it has been very popular nowadays. And we move to Tamil Nadu, terracotta tradition of Tamil Nadu. So in Tamil Nadu also we see a similar kind of terracotta sculpture of horses. But the difference is it is very huge, very large ones. And the Tamil Nadu terracottas are very famous. They are famous for the splendid 6-meter high horses. So you can imagine the height of the horse. It can be 6 meter and sometimes even 9 meter high horses are there. Too high, too large. So the terracotta art in Tamil Nadu is basically famous for the splendid 6-meter high horses. In the tradition of Tamil Nadu, in the culture of Tamil Nadu, you find the shrines to Ayyanar in the state of Tamil Nadu. It's very common. If you travel in the state of Tamil Nadu, you find the shrines to Ayyanar, which is very common in Tamil Nadu. And in the temples of Ayyanar, you find life-size terracotta statues of horses. It has been placed at the shrines to provide transportation for the INR's spirit soldiers. So this INR has spirit soldiers. So these horses are provided at the shrine so that the spirit soldiers of INR can travel from one place to another, enabling them to travel to the village and to the fields in order to offer protection, in order to fight against evil. So that is the purpose for which they make these terracotta horses, life-size terracotta horses, or even more than life-size terracotta horses are made and placed in the INR temples so that the spirit soldiers of INR can travel to the villages and field in order to protect them from evil. So I will get you some images of the terracotta sculptures of Tamil Nadu. So it's very huge. When you compare it with the Gujarat horses, the Tamil Nadu terracotta of horses are very huge. It's a traditional votive offering in INR temple, INR shrines, and it is commissioned by grateful devotees. It is commissioned by grateful devotees and it is crafted by attendant Velars. So it is crafted by attendant Velars. Velars are the non-Brahmin potter priests. They are not Brahmins, but they are potter priests. Potter priests. They are crafted by attendant Velars in sacred ceremonies that involve processions from the priest's house to clay pit in the temple premise. So they have clay pits in the temple premise, and there are processions from the clay pits to the potter's house and then to the shrine. So it's all a ritualistic process. There are certain rites associated with the making of the terracotta horses in Tamil Nadu, like you saw in the Gujarat region, in Ambaji and with the Garasya Adivasis. And how do they make it? They make a mixture of clay along with sand, very smoothly grainy clay. They make it very grainy using sand. So it's a mixture of clay along with sand. Not only sand, they also use straw and paddy husk, and it is kneaded and shaped in a special order, in a specified order. Kneaded means they rub it, they apply pressure on it in order to make it more means in order to make it shapeable. So that they can shape it in different forms. They can soften it in order to give a different shape. And they make the shape of the terracotta horse, and they fire it in kilns, in furnace. Then they are consecrated to some rituals, and that ritual is known as Kudirai Eduppu. Kudirai Eduppu. So after making it through a process which involves the mix, it's a mixture of clay along with sand, husk, straw, which is kneaded and shaped in a specified order, and they fire it in resident kilns, and they are consecrated through a ritual which is known as Kudirai Eduppu. Kudirai Eduppu literally means horse dedication. Kudirai Eduppu, which means horse dedication. So Kudirai Eduppu is horse dedication. So it's a ritual, and it is accompanied by trances, and in some instances there is animal sacrifice associated with that. So it is sometimes accompanied by trances, and in some cases you find animal sacrifice. So there is an elaborate ritual along with the consecration of these terracotta horses. So that's about the terracotta horse of INR temple. And coming to a specific region in Tamil Nadu, in the Puducherry constituency, in the Puducherry district, there is a place called Villanur. So there is a different kind of terracotta that I will show you, which is made from green clay and fine sand and tennel, which are handmade by villagers of Villanur. So the Villanur terracotta horses are handicrafts made from fine green clay, fine sand and tennel, which are handmade by villagers of Villanur. Actually, I don't get the meaning of tennel. Actually, it means breeze. It's about breeze. Is there somebody from Tamil Nadu who can explain the meaning of that word tennel? Is there someone? Okay, then it means the tennel. In Malayalam also there is a word tennel, and in Tamil also, but it means breeze, breezy. I don't exactly know the meaning of what it is. If somebody knows, please say. The history of making terracotta works in Pondicherry, is not defined or established through archaeological excavations at Arikamedu. Since if you know the site of Arikamedu, it's an archaeological site in Pondicherry, which is a proof of ancient maritime links with Rome in the 1st century AD. So the bricks and terracotta stuff found from the excavation of Arikamedu, which is from 1st century AD. But the history of terracotta works in Pondicherry that we see now, it cannot be established from that archaeological excavations. Means the history of the terracotta tradition cannot be established from the archaeological excavations. It's something different. The terracotta toys which are considered which are unearthed from that particular archaeological site is considered as something of finer quality than the type made by the Shatavahana. So it is a different kind of tradition, but we are not able to definitely establish the relation between the present tradition and the ancient or first century tradition or that was found in excavation of the Arikamedu. And the artwork is the artwork of the Villanur area, the Villanur village and neighboring areas. It is considered to have an ancestral legacy over 20 generations of the community known as Kulala. And the basic materials used in the handicrafting of the terracotta works are green clay, tennel, fine sand, and locally called saudu. Green clay, tennel, and fine sand locally called saudu. They are the materials used. And several types of tools made of bamboo are also used in crafting the art forms. In the first step of processing the clay, it is sifted to remove all the stones. So they purify the clay by sifting it, by removing thick stones out of it. They purify the clay. They get it soft and nice. Then a mixture is made of 20% of clay, 40% of tennel, and 40% of fine sand is made. So they make a mixture of clay, tennel, and fine sand. After kneading thoroughly, the mixture is cured by allowing it to dry for some time. The prepared mixture is then used for small quantities to make products such as toys, statues, etc. in different forms. So that's how they treat and make that's how they treat the clay. That's how they mix the clay and treat it before making it as toys, statues, etc. in different forms. For making statues, molds are used for the body parts, while the rest of the figures are ornamented with motifs by hand. So they mold the body. The body parts are molded and joined. So the body parts of the sculpture are molded and joined, and the ornamental parts with which you decorate the sculpture, they are made by hands. They make certain decorative motifs by hand and fix it on the body. The completed artwork is then allowed to dry for 12 hours, after which it is fired. To enhance the life of the statues, the craft work is subject to the process of firing for about 30 minutes with poda husk, powdered wood and sand. And after firing, the craft work is covered with sand and allowed to cool. Some of the products are made for gods. Means they make gods and goddesses, divinities, animal forms, and wall hangings and so forth. So it is not just horses they make. They also make gods, goddesses, divinities, animal forms, and wall hangings. So it's a practice that is found in Villanur in Puducherry. A specialty of Villanur terracotta is that it is not possible with other terracotta works that they can be made to a height of 30 feet. So it can be so huge, 30 feet, which is some 9 meters. And it can be molded in any thickness. It can be molded to any thickness. It can be very thin and it can be very thick. So that's a something very special about Villanur terracotta. Probably it is because of the process they do. They mix it with husk, they mix it with straw, sand. So they make the straw, they treat the clay in a very specific manner. So they make some products made of gods, goddesses, divinities, animal forms, wall hangings and so forth. We are going to conclude with the Bengal terracotta. In Bengal also has a very rich tradition of terracotta. Maybe we would require an entire class for Bengal terracottas. But since you are doing Indian architecture, sometimes you may come across some of the terracotta temples and all in your studies. So we don't go into detail. We just have we will just see parts of the slides and understand what it is. We will have a general look at it and we will finish it. So the West Bengal terracotta tradition. West Bengal is famous for several unique arts and crafts, all of which lend a distinctive identity to its culture. The terracotta craft is one such exclusive craft. The finest patterns of terracotta sheets can be found in Murshidabad, Birbhum, Jessore, Hooghly and Digha towns of West Bengal. So these are the different regions from where you find terracotta artifacts in Bengal. And these are some images of different areas. Terracotta temples of West Bengal are very famous. Terracotta of Bankura. So terracotta toys, terracotta images and idols are made in Bengal. The cultural transformation in the society is well captured through the terracotta craft embossed on walls of various temples, towers and similar objects in the region. Many scholars have interpreted this as a translation of the primitive Sanskrit literature into mainstream Bengali narratives that allowed the emergence of popular cults in Hinduism like Durga, Krishna, Kali, etc. The terracotta temples in Bankura are mostly Radha Krishna temples which drew inspiration from Vaishnavism. And the terracotta is characteristic of Vishnupur. Vishnupur is very famous for terracotta tradition. And one of my classmates, some of you may know him, Subhankar Chakrabarti. He has done his dissertation on Vishnupur temples and he is continuing a PhD. So if you want a reading on Vishnupur temples, the terracotta tradition, the dissertation is available in our department, artistry department, so you can get it from there. Apart from the temples, terracotta pottery, artifacts and even jewelry made in this very traditional material are famous. The most famous terracotta products are the handmade beautiful jars, discs, and the more famous of them are the terracotta horses, elephants, Ganesha and Nadaraj. But nowadays, the skilled artists and potters are not present and so they make different products like vases, men, wall hangings and also mini size dal mandal kaman or cannon. The potters here derive their inspiration from glorious history of kings and soldiers and wars. Narratives on terracotta were both sources of information and entertainment for the people, depicting stories from mythological texts of Ramayana, Mahabharata, Hitopadesha, Jataka and Panchatantra. So these are the narratives that you find in terracotta, maybe on temple walls or in the terracotta products. There has been an emphasis on scenes indicating rural life, farming techniques, male and female dancers, musicians and village gardens. So these are the different scenes that appear in some of the terracotta sculptures. And when it comes to architecture, Bengal architecture is uniquely different from the architecture that is considered with the Muslim rule in India by the end of the 16th century. A new Bengali style of temple art became prominent that was established itself as an artistic Hindu expression. This is another area of terracotta tradition which is Bengal, which has a very great legacy of terracotta tradition. And you may come across some of these traditions in other subjects also. That's why we just introduce or just have a glimpse of that. And if you try to understand we saw different areas or different specific regions of terracotta traditions in India, Molela, Gujarat, Tamil Nadu and Bengal. Even more are there, we just looked at them. These four at least. So by this you understand the differences of style. In Molela you find the plaque or the relief kind of sculptures made on terracotta plaques or on a flat surface. but in other places you find it is molded. It's a freestanding figure, and it has votive functions, votive terracottas. And Gujarat you find utensils and votive terracottas. In Tamil Nadu they have very large terracotta sculptures. In West Bengal it varies. It is a part of architecture. It's a part of decorating the architecture by terracotta works, and there are so much figures that come around the architectures. So that is the difference that you find. And there are, I will show you some terracotta temples. So it is not only in Bengal, in Bangladesh also you find temples. Like you see in Bishnupur, there are so many terracotta temples in Bishnupur, and also in parts of Bangladesh you find terracotta architecture on which you have terracotta decorations. Okay, so that's about, for images you may please refer on internet. There are so many websites available by showing all of them. If I find some of them, I will just share it. So do you have some questions or feedbacks, or if you want more than that, you also can contribute to the discussion. If you have something more to say about any of the areas I discussed, if you feel like I missed out something, or if you have something more to contribute, you can please say.